So Borderlands 4 is looking like it may be the best entry into the franchise, whether it be all of the feedback they took from Borderlands 3 to make Borderlands 4 better, or whether it be all of the new additions or big changes from previous Borderlands games. It's just looking like a good, well-designed Borderlands game. So I wanted to go over the 5 new additions or changes coming to Borderlands 4. And these aren't in any particular order. I think they're all pretty massive new additions or changes. So at number 5, we have Ordinance. Now the Ordinance slot is just a new addition into the game that I think is going to make a lot of the gameplay significantly better. So in Borderlands 4, instead of having heavy weapons take up a weapon slot, now they're all going to be put into one slot, the Ordinance slot, and instead of using ammo like all previous games, they're now on a cooldown system. So there's not going to be any grenade ammo, rocket launcher ammo, heavy machine gun ammo, nothing like that. It's all going to be cooldown based on the Ordinance slot, but this also means you can't use like a rocket launcher and a grenade anymore. Now, one of the biggest reasons why this is such a good change is because they can keep all of these type of weapons that are going to be in the Ordinance slot being incredibly strong. In previous games, especially going back to like Borderlands 3, grenades essentially became useless if you weren't doing a grenade build. Maybe you would use it to like apply a debuff or heal you, but a lot of builds would just generally not use their grenades because they were so weak, because you could just keep getting ammo back for them. They couldn't make them strong in a baseline. But now in the Ordnance slot, based upon cooldown, they can be strong at all times. And grenades and heavy weapons are going to work a little bit differently. They're still going to be on cooldowns, but grenades are going to have a certain amount of charges that you can get more of. And heavy weapons, it seems, are just kind of on a cooldown. It replenishes ammo as the cooldown goes. So maybe being able to replenish ammo quicker is a way you're going to reduce the cooldown on heavy weapons like miniguns or rocket launchers. But the Ordnance slot is also going to be absolutely ridiculous because we know things like grenades are part of the license part system. So you're going to have all the different random rolls you can get. This slot is obviously going to still have all the rarities all the way up to legendary. So there's just going to be so many ridiculous options with this that you are absolutely going to have some Ordnance focused builds, because we've also seen that even in some of the skill trees, specifically with Rafa, that he has a bunch of things that buff up Ordnance, because Ordnance damage is actually a new damage type. So everything in that slot does Ordnance damage unless specified it does something different. So you'll be able to make full builds based around Ordnance. And that's something that's incredibly interesting to me and will just allow for a bunch of additional builds and crazy combinations. And at number 4, we have skill tree improvements. And this is one of the things that's the most exciting for me for any Borderlands game or RPGs in general, just checking out how interesting their skill trees are going to be. And going into Borderlands 4, they're significantly bigger and more interesting than every previous Borderlands game. They still kept some things from Borderlands 3, but they just went absolutely crazy with them in Borderlands 4. There's over 100 options for every Vault Hunter. Every Vault Hunter has 3 different skill trees that all have their own action skill. Then you have all of the normal nodes like you had in previous Borderlands games, but a bunch of them also seem much more interesting as well, with a lot more complex effects. But then as you progress throughout the tree and unlock more rows, you'll start to unlock augments to your action skill, which can be a secondary activatable ability, essentially another action skill, or I think sometimes can just be like a passive augment, and you get one of those. Then as you progress, there's these 3 boxes at the bottom that you progress into separately, and once you get to the end of those, they have a capstone, which is a really powerful passive that you can have one of that also ties directly back into your action skill. So there's just going to be a ridiculous amount of combinations based upon that. Then you have your unique passive trait for every Vault Hunter. Like for Vex, if you're using an elemental weapon, whatever element that is, your action skill follows that. So if you say have the Trouble summon for Vex, which is your permanent pet, as you change weapons and change their elements, Trouble's elemental damage will change with it. So your Vault Hunter traits are also incredibly strong. So just everything around these skill trees going into Borderlands 4 is upgraded and improved from previous Borderlands games. They're bigger and you have a lot more options than you've ever had before. And the developer said that they specifically want to do this to make the most amount of builds possible in any Borderlands game. And that's absolutely music to my ears. And at number 3, we have boss and mission respawning. Probably one of the biggest upgrades I think we've ever gotten in a Borderlands game. In every previous Borderlands game, you couldn't really replay missions unless you went into like True Vault Hunter mode or something like that, but you couldn't just replay them as you wanted. And to respawn or re-defeat bosses, you usually had to do something else, primarily going back to the main menu, loading back into the game. After you defeat bosses or complete missions, there will be a Moxie's Encore machine that you just activate and it resummons a boss instantly. It doesn't even take any time or any load or anything. Now, we haven't seen it specifically respawning missions, but the developers did say that you can use these machines to also replay missions, which is also going to be incredibly strong, specifically for missions, because there's been a lot of really strong mission rewards in the past that you had to like save scum or do things like that to try to farm a good version of that mission reward. Now you'll just be able to get to max level and then replay the missions as much as you want to try to get good rolls of mission rewards. And specifically when talking about bosses, it is just so nice to be able to not have to leave the game and stop the gameplay to be able to farm bosses as much as you want. You just kill the boss, there'll be a replay machine somewhere close by, you go use it, respawn the boss, and re-kill the boss. No having to go back to the main menu or anything like that. It's going to save a bunch of time and it will just be significantly more fun. That's been one of the worst parts for Borderlands games for me, having to always load back to the main menu, load back into the game, and then you kill the boss. It always feels like a really bad version of gameplay. And currently, Moxie's Encore machine costs a small amount of in-game money, just cash, but Randy Pitchford specifically said he doesn't ever want the machine to be prohibitive, so at some point you would not be able to go and respawn the boss. He never wants that, so it may not even have a cost when the game is actually launched. And at number 2, we have a seamless world. And this is another pretty massive change going from every previous Borderlands game. If you've played any other Borderlands game, you'll know that it's generally a small-ish or medium-ish, sometimes a larger area. But if you want to go to anywhere else, you have to go through a load screen. And some of these areas are small. You have to go through multiple load screens. Sometimes you can get to new areas very quickly. So if you're trying to go farm something, you're just going through a bunch of different load screens to get to where you want to go. But in Borderlands 4, there's going to be a very small amount of load screens. And based upon what we've seen in the gameplay, it seems the load screens are also going to be very fast, even initially loading into the game. I think on the PCs in the most recent test, people were loading in like 6 seconds or less. And I think that was still on 4K. So the load times are ridiculously fast. And then it seems there's going to be almost none of them. So it seems that how Borderlands 4 is designed is on launch, there's going to be 4 different regions or zones. And it seems how those are going to work is to get into, say, get into a new one of these 4 regions. There'll be a load screen to get into it, but once you're in that area, it'll be fully seamless and there won't be any load screens. There's also how they're allowing for when you're playing in a group, you can teleport to each other very easily, just anytime you want. And I don't think there's a load screen for that either. So if you're playing with someone and they're on the other side of that big zone, you could teleport to them almost instantly without a load screen and just traverse the entirety of that massive zone. And also keep in mind, Borderlands 4 is significantly bigger than any previous Borderlands game, so these zones are going to be absurdly big, and it's going to be semi-open world. They keep calling it seamless, and I think that's just because you have that load screen to go between the zones, but when you're in them, they're basically open worlds, and as we've seen, there's going to be a ton of new random events and content to always come across while in this new seamless world. And then at number 1, we have an endgame focus. Now, I know we really haven't gotten much information specifically on Endgame. That will come at some point before launch, but we have a few pieces of information on the Endgame. The most important ones being that multiple developers, including Randy Pitchford, have very much specified that the entirety of Borderlands 4 has been designed around Endgame. There are skill trees, all of the different systems, the weapon rolling, pretty much everything in Borderlands 4, including like a lot of the balancing, has been designed around the idea of having a robust and expansive endgame on launch. Multiple developers have really teased that there will be a lot of endgame in Borderlands 4 on launch, and I think it was Randy Pitchford, maybe another one of the developers said this as well, but they said that Borderlands 4 will have the most amount of endgame content on launch of any Borderlands game so far. And it seems like there's going to be a substantial amount of endgame content. We do know of a few endgame systems. We know after you hit level 50, which seems to be the max level on launch, you'll start to get specialization points, which is pretty much the new badass ranks, but we know these aren't just going to be stat increases like previous games. These are going to be more substantial choices. It sounds like you're going to be more picking perks or new effects that actually affect gameplay in some way or have cool new procs or effects instead of just being stat increases, which is pretty much what every previous Borderlands game is. So that's an endgame specific system. We know the new firmware system, which are essentially gear sets, aren't going to be endgame specific, but they're going to be endgame focused. So you're probably not going to care much about them until the endgame. And this is a new gear set system where on all of your gear pieces besides your 4 weapons, you're going to have these firmware rolls. So there's going to be 5 of them total, and each one will have different effects on them. And you can get up to a 3-piece of this, but you could also just have 5 different firmware sets, 1 out of 3, or you could have a 3 out of 3 set and a 2 out of 3 set. So this is just more progression and gearing on top of everything else new we already have. And then again, every other system in the game is designed and focused around the end game. So everything of Borderlands 4 was built while thinking of what end game they're going to have on launch and what end game they're going to have post-launch. And we also know there's going to be a bunch of post-launch content. And this is the thing I've always wanted for Borderlands games. I want them to have a lot more end game and a lot more post-launch support, specifically focused on, I think Borderlands 4 has just always been in the right position to have a really robust end game that keeps players playing the game and they keep adding onto it. So those are 5 of the best new changes or additions coming to Borderlands 4, and a lot of these make me very excited to finally play this when it comes out in a couple months. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.